Welcome to the Burn Up Podcast. My name is Adam Nugent. I'm your host. It's an honor to be with you today, and I'm super excited and super passionate about what we're going to discuss today. You know, it's a new year, and many people have New Year's resolutions around their physical health. For those of you that don't know, I used to weigh 350 pounds. I have battled my weight on and off for most of my life, and for those of you that are struggling with your weight, I see you, I empathize with you, I know this all too well. I have done every fad diet, everything known to man over the years, and could never seem to find anything that actually worked. And I'm so passionate about this that I've actually just launched within my coaching program called Burn Up Fitness. It's specifically designed and catered and customized for men, that are over 35 years old that have at least 40 pounds to lose. Now, many people think, oh, I only have 20 pounds or 30 pounds to lose. I'll tell you that if you think you have only 30 pounds to lose, it's probably 40. It could be even 50. If you think you have 50 pounds to lose, it could be 60. It could be 70. It's more often than not a bigger number than you actually think it might be. That's been my experience. Having peaked at 350 pounds, I know all too well what it feels like to be out of shape. It affects every aspect of your life. For those of you that are married, it affects your marriages and your relationships. It affects your business. It affects friendships. It affects how you move through the world. And for those of you that have really struggled, and for many that have struggled for much or if not all of their life, it keeps you from actually being fully present. It keeps you from being the best version of yourself. And having known both sides of it, and now here at 47 years old, being in the best shape of my life, I am super aware, super confident in knowing that if you are in shape, your life will be exponentially better in all aspects. And so today I want to talk a little bit about my own journey, how I got to where, what led me to being out of shape and what I was able to do to actually shift out of that. And much of weight loss, frankly, is really learning to manage our emotions and the mental side of things. It is actually the key ingredient. If we're being honest with ourselves, to actually lose weight, the formula to do so is not overly complicated. It's caloric deficit, it's what you eat, it's working out, it's building muscle. No matter who you talk to, everybody is teaching and coaching different versions of the same thing. What the biggest thing missing, in my opinion, in the weight loss industries specifically is literally helping people manage their emotions, learning how to detach from food as a way of coping. Now, I believe we're all addicts. We're all addicted to something. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be drugs and alcohol for others. It could be social media. It could be porn. It could be what have you. But for most people, there is a layer of unhealthy attachment to food. Food was the drug. Eating was the addiction. When I was happy, I would eat. When I was sad, I would eat. When I was anxious, I would eat. I used food for everything. And it took control of my life to the point where I had no control over it. At least I felt like I didn't have any control over it. And I would go into spurts. I could do anything for a short period of time. Today 75 Hard is very popular. And most people that I know that have gone on 75 Hard have either gone back to where they were or in some cases have actually put on even more weight. If we don't learn to embody a new way of living, a new way of being, looking at fitness and nutrition as a marathon rather than a sprint, we're more likely to fall back into old patterns, and we're more likely to fall back into, the way we used to do things because our body's used to it. If you've been using food to cope and manage your emotions for your entire life, to all of a sudden shift overnight is very difficult. It's challenging. Most people can't go from what I say 0 to hero or go from eating unhealthy to eating healthy and just staying that way indefinitely. When you start on a health journey, when you start losing weight, when you start getting in shape, you're going to fall back into old patterns. You're going to screw up. You're going to mess up. You're going to want to do that. You're going to feel the cravings. You're going to feel all the emotions. It's normal. So what do you do when you get to that? We're going to talk about that today. And I'm going to share a couple of things that I've learned that have really helped me manage that. Because even today, with as healthy as I am and as disciplined and consistent I am, if I get triggered, my first instinct is I still want to eat. It's still my go-to. That's been the way for over 40 years, and most likely that will not go away. But now 9 times out of 10 or 9.5 times out of 10, I don't go to that because I have other ways of managing my emotions. So I'm going to talk about a couple of things that you can start to implement into your life today to do that. So as I said, I could go back to when I was 9 years old. I was living in Chicago at the time with my family, and I broke my arm and was, wasn't mobile, wasn't able to exercise. I always played games and done a lot of things. And it was during that time between the ages of 9 and 10 where I actually started to put on weight. It's interesting that during that time, a funny story is my parents didn't know what to do with me, didn't know what to do with it. Their oldest son here is putting on all this weight. So their doctor told them the best thing they could do is get a little mini trampoline. And so, we had an apartment there in Chicago, and at night they would have me jump on this trampoline for 15, 20 minutes in front of the TV. Now, again, what they ended up doing, which they didn't intend to do, but all of a sudden as a 9-year-old, I had a complex about my weight, which I believe no 9-year-old should even think twice about it. But nevertheless, that was something that was instilled to me unintentionally, but just the attention to it. I became very self-conscious, very aware, and it had a significant impact in my life, frankly, for most of my life until I was able to really heal and work through all of that. In fact, along that same story, it was here just a few years ago where I finally sat my parents down and I'm like, what the hell were you thinking when you had a 9-year-old, jump on a trampoline and bring so much attention to it? My mom sat there sobbing and she's like, we didn't know what to do, and of course they got that information from a doctor. I mean, I believe there's other ways and much better ways to be able to help our children be healthy and eat healthy. But nevertheless, I was able to kind of release that because I didn't realize it, but I was carrying a lot of resentment towards my parents as a result of that. And that's now all gone. So over the years, I was always outgoing, played sports, did all the things, but there was a part of me that was always self-conscious, always worried about my weight. My worth was tied to my weight and how I looked in the mirror. Very social in high school, but I didn't participate in a lot of things. If we were going swimming, or if there were pool parties, I didn't usually participate, or I'd make up excuses to not do things. I was always self-conscious, and it was such a horrible feeling. And as my weight got piled on and on and on, in fact, I graduated in high school, I weighed 270 pounds. It really weighed on me. And, after high school, I was playing rugby, and I made a decision that I was going to get healthy. I was going to start on the national rugby team at the time. Was able to do so. I lost a ton of weight, got down to 200 pounds over basically a 6-month period. Ended up going on at the time I was LDS, Mormon, went on a Mormon mission. And I came off my mission weighing 188, which for my frame was way too small. My brothers were teasing me when they saw me that I looked like Skeletor from He-Man, just so gaunt, way too thin for my frame. And nevertheless, I got to kind of experience it when I was 21, what it felt like to be in shape. I was working out thereafter, got up to, in an ideal weight for me was around 215, 220 pounds. I was in phenomenal shape at 21, 22 years old. And then I got sick, fell back into some old patterns. And then from 22, frankly, until here, in the last couple of years, struggled with my weight. Yo-yos, big swings, 50 pounds, 60 pounds, 70 pounds, 100-pound swings. I mean, I've gained and lost so much weight over the years, I could go on Oprah. Very, very painful. And I shared this recently on social media, but there was a breaking point for me in 2018. I was going through a divorce, and through the pain of and not knowing what to do with my emotions and not having the tools at that time to be able to work through all of that, I just kept turning to food over and over and over. And at that time, as I mentioned earlier, I peaked at 350 pounds. There was a moment when I was going through my divorce, I was in my new house alone, and my ex-wife, my co-parent, which she and I today are great friends, we're in a very good space, but at that time she called me, and I don't even remember what happened, but she just started to tear into me. And I got off the phone and I went into a trance, and I just started eating uncontrollably, anything I could find. And as if that wasn't enough, I then DoorDashed even more food, and I sat there and just gorged myself to the point of just feeling so sick. And I sat there in my living room alone and bawled my eyes out. And it was at that moment I told myself, Adam, what you're doing isn't working. It's time to change. So the pain of my current circumstances, where I currently was, exceeded the pain of change. For a lot of us, especially for men, sometimes it has to get bad. I ask myself that now. Why is that? Why does it have to get so bad before somebody changes? Why does something have to, why does there have to be so much loss or travesty or heartache before someone actually flips the switch? And unfortunately, a lot of people are like that. And I'm not unique from that perspective. But nevertheless, I'm grateful for that breaking moment. That was a very painful moment, but it was a very pivotal move in for me taking charge of my health. And I got strict, I got diligent, and I started to, exercise religiously. And more importantly, I started to watch what I was eating. And so in that first year, I went from 350 pounds, down to 280. So I lost 70 pounds that first year. And then over the course of 3 or 4 years, continued to lose weight, continued to build muscle. At the time of this recording, I'm getting ready to be in a men's physique show and a bodybuilding show here in about 3 months. I never thought that was possible. And the level of discipline that it takes to prepare for that is not for the faint of heart. I honor and respect anyone that's gone through that process. But to go from 350 pounds to being shredded on stage is not that common. And I love the challenge. I want to push myself to see really what's possible. Because I believe that we can have anything we want or be whomever we want if we're willing to do the work, period. And one of the unique things that I have in offering the men that I'm working with in my fitness program with Burn Up Fitness is that I know your pain. I know what it feels like to be tremendously out of weight. I know what it feels like to look in the mirror and hate what you see. I hated myself. Many times I couldn't even look myself in the eyes. Years ago, I had a dear friend and we were doing a coaching program, and one of the things that we were doing was basically mirror work, where we wrote down 20 I am statements. I am beautiful, I am sexy, I am smart, whatever it happens to be. We wrote all these things down, and then we were supposed to go in front of the mirror and actually recite that to ourselves. So I'm like, oh yeah, let's do this. I'm excited. I'm ready to go forward and do this. And so, I wrote the things down, didn't believe any of it. And then I went to the mirror to say them to myself, and I couldn't say it. I didn't believe it. It was too painful. And, we would have check-ins, weekly check-ins, and she'd be like, hey, how's it going? And I kept making excuses. I was busy. I didn't do this, or I'd kind of beat around the bush. The truth was, I didn't have the strength to be able to say that. It hurt too much to actually say those things, And here's the thing too. We live in a society where there's a lot of celebrities, Lizzo comes to mind, and others that actually, almost glorify obesity or being out of shape. And I truly believe if you were to get them outside of the cameras alone, if they had a choice between how they look there or being in shape, they would choose being in shape. I just don't believe it when someone says, I'm 100% love who I am, when they're, physically out of shape, or more importantly, in some cases, obese. And so as I kept telling myself and doing incantations and working through this, even though I didn't believe it, the truth was that once I started to lose the weight and got in the health, that was the catalyst to actually start to have, belief in what I was saying, that I could look at myself in the mirror and say, I am beautiful, or, I am in good shape, or I am confident. Everything is really rooted in a story, and it's a story we're telling ourselves. But I also feel it's very important that we don't lie to ourselves. So if at 350 pounds, for me to look in the mirror and say, I'm sexy, or I'm in phenomenal shape, is a lie. It's not true. So even though that's what I want to have, I can tell myself whatever I want. But frankly, once you tell yourself something and then you back it with action and then you see the results, that's where magic happens. And the last thing I want to do is lie to anyone, especially myself. And all of us many times do lie to ourselves. And we can get into that in a different podcast. But nevertheless, when you are physically out of shape, it affects everything. Now, one of the key things that it really affected in me was my worth. Now, I'm a believer, and I believe wholeheartedly today, that our worth should never be in question, period. Like, we're alive, we're humans. We have, just by being who we are worthy of anything and everything we want. Our worth is not tied to that. Yet confidence and other things that come with being in shape, that has to be earned. We have to do the work necessary to do it. I used to be so jealous of people that were out of shape, people that were in shape. You could blame genetics, or, people that had willpower to stop eating. I honestly used to get jealous of my kids when they could just stop eating. It's like there was something in me that couldn't even stop. I can't leave food on the plate. In fact, I couldn't even leave food on their plate. So if they got up, I would finish what they didn't eat. I mean, it's crazy to look back on it, but yet I know I'm not alone. I know millions and millions of people deal with this, like that attachment to food. It's like a drug. It's very addictive. And I can tell you that the years of that were very painful. And we turn to food, or we turn to substance, frankly, to not feel, or to numb, or in many ways check out and not feel the pain. And the irony in that, like for those of us that have suffered with weight, or those of you that are suffering for weight, if you're a person that turns to food to manage your emotions, the reality is we're turning to something, or you're turning to something that to make the pain go away. But once you get into that, it's so temporary. And then all of a sudden you feel even worse. So you're stuck in this cycle of just feeding the beast that's making you unhealthy, that's making you unhappy, that's actually really hurting you. You know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. Yet for those that have really struggled with food addiction, like you just get stuck in the cycle. So I would turn to food to comfort, to make whatever I was feeling go away, but yet those feelings always came flooding back 100% of the time. So years ago, back right around 2018, this dear friend that was, my accountability partner in the I am statements, the mirror work, she said something I'll never forget. She said, your physical body is an outward manifestation of what's going on in the inside. Now here I am, 350 pounds, my belly's hanging over my belt. And I think she's just talking straight to me. I was offended. I was, she's saying that to me. And whether she was saying it to me or not, it's irrelevant. The truth is she said something that struck a chord in me. And the reality is, one thing to think of as a side note is any emotions that we ever feel are ours and ours alone. And if anyone says something to you or says something to us that hurts us, or, we have a reaction to, it's because we're attaching to something they say. For example, if someone today came up to me and said, hey, I think you're fat or you're out of shape, it would go in one ear and out the other. I don't even connect with that. That's not real. Like, that's something I know. But back then, when you're out of shape, if anyone said anything about weight, it always struck a chord. I got insecure. It bothered me. In some cases, I was projecting my reaction onto other people. And the reality was those were my emotions because they were saying something that I connected with. That's really important, really, in any aspect. So if you're triggered by anything anyone says, there is something that they said that either consciously or more often subconsciously, you have a belief or an attachment to. And that is the universe's way of helping you tell you that, hey, this is something you need to look at. This is something you need to work through, or this is something you need to heal. So the beautiful thing is, as I was working on my physical health, I was also working on my emotional and mental health, working with therapists and coaches. I was going all in on my total health, from physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, all of it. And as I was healing the inside, the more that I healed the inside, the weight actually just naturally fell off. Many times we'll actually hold on to weight. Our body will hold on to it if we have emotions and things we haven't worked through. So it's not uncommon that you could be, eating quote unquote healthy and not able to lose weight, or even possibly putting on weight. Much of that could be actually tied to emotions. So a big component of weight loss is really learning to manage that and get those in check. When we're feeding ourselves, or we turn to sugar, or we turn to fried food, or whatever it is, there's a dopamine hit that our brain is searching for. Again, it's that temporary relief. And if we've been feeding that dopamine with food and we all of a sudden stop doing it, our brain is going to be telling us, hey, where is this? We need this. We need this. That's where the uncomfortableness comes in. That's where it feels sometimes it's impossible to eat healthy. That's why sometimes we'll be really, really good. And then all of a sudden one day we go off the rails because we're trying to feed that dopamine. And so many times too, if that's been your go-to, what my experience is much of my eating was just, great, unconscious. It was just the default. If I went to a party and there was a bunch of food laid out, it wasn't uncommon that I'm just slowly eating things throughout the entire night or day. And before I know it, I'm completely stuffed and frankly didn't even realize I wasn't consciously eating. So many times, it's learning to, when that emotion comes up, is to not give into it. And so one of the things that I've embodied and learned, and so here's a great tip for those of you that really struggle with that or want to turn to food, is the first step in being able to shift out of that is awareness. You have to become aware of the patterns and the cycles that we fall into. So now when I get triggered, my first step now is I'm aware and I get curious about it. So curiosity is king. So once you get curious about it, once you're aware with it, then what do you do? So one thing I can tell you not to do is if all of a sudden, let's say you're being good and then all of a sudden you see, cookies or donuts or whatever on the table and you just go to town, and you start to eat it, or then you've eaten all of it or eaten more than you normally would or wanted to, and then you start to beat yourself up, that's like throwing gasoline on the fire. So in those moments when you indulge or give in to eating something that you don't want to eat or what's not good for you, rather than beat yourself up, it's an opportunity to be aware. It's like, okay, I just did this again. Interesting. You have this conversation with yourself. By bringing awareness to it and without judgment, you start to become more and more and more aware. When you judge something or you beat yourself up for it, it just gets even worse. So the first step is practicing awareness. It's practicing curiosity. Now, again, as I mentioned earlier, when I get triggered, I still want to turn to food. So if all of a sudden I catch myself into a trance, it doesn't happen that often, but if I do, more often than not, I'm able to stop myself before I open the cupboard and go for the Oreos or go for whatever. And I'll stop and I'll ask myself, Adam, are you hungry? Are you just eating this to manage anxiety? Like, what is it? Try to get to the root of it. And so I'll sit with it. I'll sit in that uncomfortableness. And sitting in the uncomfortableness without judgment, without thinking I have to have it, I'm just asking myself a question. And what I have found, the more I practice that desire to go for the food, to manage, let's say, the anxiety, goes away. And I'm not kidding when I say this, in 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 30 seconds max, it's gone. It just goes away. When I can pause, when I can be curious, and then just ask myself, why am I doing this? I'm able to shift out of this. Now, this has taken time to be able to develop. This isn't something overnight that all of a sudden you can do, but it is something overnight that you can start to practice. The more conscious you become, the more aware you become, the less likely you are to engage in that. Now, again, this is a dopamine that the body's searching for. So what I have found is when I feel that anxiety or I feel that emotion, I'm triggered, I many times need to find something to calm my nerves. So today, what I do to calm my nerves when I get like that is I will actually meditate. I actually sit in silence. I'll even sit more into the uncomfortableness and I'll just be quiet and I sit with myself. I have found that meditation is one of the greatest tools to be able to shift out of that. The other great thing that works for me, and I've got the privilege of this as I have a cold plunge, is cold water therapy. I believe is probably the greatest thing that you can do when you're triggered or when you're trying to get over any addiction. The dopamine hit that you get from a cold plunge is the equivalent of eating a bunch of sugar. It's the equivalent, honestly, of taking a line of cocaine. The beautiful thing about cold water therapy is there's no crash. So when I get into addictive patterns, because I have an addictive personality with whatever it is, I will turn to cold water therapy and I'll do it a lot, sometimes multiple times a day. It helps me move through it. It still gets the dopamine hit, but there's no crash. It is an incredible tool. There's a ton of physical benefits, but for me, it's the emotional, mental effect that cold water therapy has. And today, I religiously do it every day. It's how I start my day. It's something that you can turn to. You need to find other ways of managing those emotions and giving your brain the dopamine hit. It could be as simple as going for a walk. It could be as simple as going to exercise. I mean, you need to find something to replace the food, AKA the dopamine that the body's searching for. So that's one step that you can do in helping manage your emotions. Curiosity, pause, reflect on it, and just sit in the uncomfortableness. Most of us aren't okay not being okay. And when we don't feel good or we feel whatever emotion we don't want to feel, we try to go to something to make it go away. It could be go to Netflix. It could be porn. It could be alcohol. It doesn't matter what it is. Here we're talking about food. And for most people, they do tend to lean towards food. And so again, stopping, reflecting, and looking at it from curiosity and then replacing it with another activity or something to move in your body will help you move through that. It takes practice. It doesn't happen overnight, but the more you do it, even though it's uncomfortable because the default's to go back to food, the longer you're able to sustain that, the less harder it becomes, the easier it becomes. I always say the hard button is the easy button. And for me, and I'm living proof that no matter where you are physically, you can get in phenomenal shape, no matter how old you are, no matter what's going on in your life, if you choose to do the work and frankly get comfortable being uncomfortable. Much of our uncomfortableness or the anxiety that we feel isn't so much what we're dealing with, it's the resistance of what's happening. So for example, if I'm feeling anxious or stressed about something, that's usually rooted because I haven't done something or I need to follow through on it. So I will cure my anxiety, if you will, if I actually do what I haven't done or something that I put off. That's first and foremost. But then also when we when we allow ourselves just to sit in it and just feel it, the universe will move it. And when I'm feeling anxious, for example, rather than resisting it and getting upset or which just creates more anxiety, once I accept it, once I surrender to the fact of I'm dealing with whatever emotion I'm dealing with, the pain of it or the intensity of it goes down. It's fascinating how that works. So even though we might not like something or we don't like how we feel, if we just accept it and just say, you know what, I don't like this and it is what it is, and have that type of attitude or that type of behavior towards it, the intensity that we're used to feeling will not be as intense at all. And then frankly, we can get through anything. I don't believe that we're ever faced with anything that we can't handle. I believe whatever your belief is spiritually from God, the universe, we will never give anything we can't handle. So many times when we have things that feel so heavy that we're not going to be able to get through, those are opportunities to lean more into it, to surrender into the process. And I can tell you, having gone through some very horrific, very painful things, each one of those experiences that I've gone through would have been much less painful, much less intense had I just surrendered into it. They would have been much less intense had I not turned to other substances, behaviors, whatever, to try to numb and make it go away. Many times when we're avoiding feeling something and we turn to other things, we're just kicking the can down the road. You can't outrun it. So you can take something that would be very painful. It could take years to work through, or it can take months, or it can take weeks, or it can take days, or it can take hours. It's a choice and how we choose to look at those challenges. One of the advantages that you get if you decide to hire me and work with my team on losing weight, again, I'm working specifically with men that have at least 30 to 40 pounds to lose, is you get to work with somebody in a team of people that have actually been in your shoes. And what I mean by that is we know what it feels like to be heavy, or in some cases, extremely heavy or obese. I've been there. I know that. Many times I always used to think to myself when I'd see personal trainers and other people in this industry helping others, I always had this little thought in the back of my head. I'm like, well, you don't know. You truly don't know. You don't know what it's like to weigh this. You don't know what it's like to deal with this. You don't know all the stories that I tell myself. And I can tell you that I do. I get it. I know every excuse. I know every story. I know everything that you're telling yourself as to why or how hard it is. Trust me, I've told myself this thing thousands of times over. So in working with someone like me and working with my team, you're going to get a team that actually understands you and actually knows. I truly believe you can't know something unless you've experienced it. Otherwise, it's just a belief or something we've read or learned or heard. But knowledge, real knowledge, comes from experience. And so working with me and working with my team, you actually work with a team that has experience, that knows your pain, that knows what you're dealing with, that knows how hard it is, and most importantly, knows what's possible. I mean, I'm living proof of it. And, having lost well over 100 pounds and completely radically transforming my body, I can tell you if I can do it, you can do it. I am so passionate about this. And I truly believe that applies in every aspect of your life. And I truly believe you can have it all. We can have it all. I truly believe God wants us to have it all, but it's not going to be given to us. It needs to be earned. We're actually the creators of our life. And if we're willing to do the work and lean into it, that's when you get spiritual help. That's when you get spiritual guidance, when you're actually able to lean in. Energy goes where energy flows. And the more you work towards a goal and stay in it, even when it's painful, even when it's scary, that's where magic happens. Everything we want on the other side of what we're avoiding. My tagline is freedom is in the fire. And I truly believe that as we lean more into the fire, that's where magic happens. I believe that fear, pain, heartache, all of these emotions that we don't want to feel are actually gifts from the universe. That's where growth happens. That's where we up level. My logo is a man rising up just like a phoenix rising. That growth is only possible through challenges, failures, setbacks. And when we're talking about weight loss and health, that transformation can only occur when you step into the fire, when you do what is hard. And again, as I said earlier, the hard button becomes the easy button. This program that I'm running is very customized. It's very personal. It covers obviously the basics from nutrition and workout plans, supplements, hormones, all of that. But there's a completely different component that most people don't offer, and it's the emotional coaching and the emotional support you get in helping you detach your unhealthy attachments with food. That, my friends, is the most critical part of all of this. And so if you are a man that has at least 30 to 40 pounds to lose, I invite you to reach out to me. You can reach out to me on, my email is adam@burnup.com, or you can reach out to me on social. It's just my first and last name, Adam Nugent. And let's have a conversation. Let's see what we can help. Working with me and working with my team is going to be like nothing else you've ever done. And you're going to be working with specialists, people that have a ton of experience, not only in coaching, but more importantly, in lived experiences with knowledge of knowing the ins and outs of all of it. And most importantly, the ins and outs of all the things that are holding you back from actually being the best version of yourself. It's been an honor to share this with you today. Thank you for joining me on this podcast, and I look forward to seeing you soon.